See, the songs are up here. I'm going to lead a quick song back here. Before we get going. You got something different up there. I saw the song back there. All right, we are on chapter 4. Well, they're not chapters. Lesson 4. Lesson 4. Anybody need a book? Oh, good. Our second in Philippians, 2 lessons, Paul got acquainted with the church. Our second lesson in today was just his introduction, just the introduction of kind of what was, what he was writing to him about and all that good stuff. And this, of course, is, we're kind of going to get into the meat of it a little bit, okay? Once again, it's called Growth of the Gospel. I kind of an odd title, but anyway, there wasn't really, there's several different subjects in here. And a few that we've talked about before. Feel like as I was doing my lesson, I'm going to be repeating myself a little bit. But they're big things, they're big concepts, they're big ideas, things I'm going to be kind of repeating myself on. But let's go ahead and read, I believe it's 12 through 18. There's not really much of an introduction. We're going to jump right in today, really, to the text of the lesson here. But let's read the sections as we do the sections. So let's start off with verses 12 through 18. Paul says, "But I want you to know, brethren, that the things which happened to me have actually turned out for the furtherance of the gospel, so that it has become evident to the whole palace guard and to all the rest that my chains are in Christ. And most of the brethren in the Lord, having become confident by my chains, are much more bold to speak the word without fear. Some indeed preach Christ even from envy and strife, and some also from goodwill. The former preach Christ from selfish ambition," that's talking about envy and strife, "not sincerely, supposing to add affliction to my chains, but the latter out of love, knowing that I am appointed for the defense of the gospel. What then? Only in that every way, whether in presence or in truth, Christ is preached, and in this I rejoice. Yes, I will rejoice. For I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ. According to I went a little, okay, my bad. Supposed to stop at 18 there, so we went a little farther. All right, so Paul's telling them he's in chains, and kind of here's what's going on. Here's what's happening. He starts off by saying, because of his situation, what has happened? In general, because of my situation, what has happened?
More people are hearing the gospel.
More people are hearing the gospel. Good things are happening because of my situation. Don't think that because I'm in chains, nothing good is happening here, okay? More people are hearing about the gospel. More people are speaking boldly about Jesus. And he starts off by telling them it's a good thing. Let's get into some specifics here. It is evident the whole palace guard and to all the rest that my chains are in Christ. It is apparent to the whole palace guard, okay? So what I get out of that statement is it's becoming clear to everybody that what am I guilty of? No real crime. Yeah, that's right. Not a real crime, but being a disciple of Jesus. That's why I'm in chains. That's what Paul says is becoming evident to these people. And it's a good situation, okay? Others have learned, so Paul's saying it's a good situation. Going to go into what I talked about already 2 or 3 times in this lesson study right here. Good things can come out of bad situations. Okay, that is a theme of Paul here, is that good things can come out of bad situations. You can be in a job situation you don't like. You can be in a financial situation that you don't like. But that does not mean that you are completely, you're completely useless to God, that you can't do anything for the cause, because Paul says you can, and he gives you an example here. He doesn't just say it, he's showing you that good things can come out of bad situations, and that's what he's saying here. So God uses difficult situations to accomplish his purposes. All right, that's kind of the first point here. And that's, once again, that's not just Paul. That didn't stop after Paul died, that's something that has gone on all throughout time, is that God can use difficult situations, whether they be personal, whether they be, whatever, okay? God can use difficult situations to accomplish his goals or purposes, either one. And sometimes it almost looks like those difficult situations are on purpose, okay? Those difficult situations maybe are part of God's plan, all right? We're going to talk about suffering later, and that's a big part of the last section of this reading right here. We're going to talk about suffering here in a little while, and we're going to talk about it quite a bit, okay? When you suffer for anything, in any way, shape, form, or fashion, when you suffer, whether it's because of your belief or not, we've got to think, and I'm going to reiterate this when we get there because it's a big part. We've got to think, what's the cause here? What's the purpose of this? Well, there might not be a specific purpose. We know. Tell me some of the things the Bible tells us about suffering. Is it going to happen or is it not going to happen? It's going to happen. Okay. Why is it going to happen? It's necessary. Okay. We have to be tested. We have to be proven. All right. Well, what about this statement? If God was so powerful, if God is all powerful, why is he letting me suffer? Anybody ever heard that before? If God is so powerful, why is he letting me suffer? Well, I don't mean to step on any toes here, but if that's your attitude, it probably means you haven't read enough of the Bible. Because what does the Bible tell us? There's going to be suffering. There's going to be hardships. There's going to be hard times. That's part of it. And to add another step, to add another layer to it, do we think we're better than Jesus? When Jesus came to this earth, what was a big part of his life? Suffering, okay? Suffering was a big part of Jesus. Why would God have Jesus come to this earth and suffer and us expect everything to be great? So, thoughts on that? Anything?
That's something that Jay, in the last couple of years, a lot of my reading and Bible study that I've really been thinking a lot about. And you're right on. You made some good points already. I've already, this summer, I'm going to be at Broadway on Wednesday night. So they gave me a lot of option topics. One of them was suffering. As soon as I saw it, that's the one I chose because I know I've got to study on all that, but it had been intriguing me for quite a while. And it bothers me too because the land we live in, the
Yes.
times we live in. I mean, I see some things that might be changed, but I don't know. I have not suffered very much because I'm a disciple of Jesus Christ.
Right.
And it bothers me. Could be partly a blessing from God, but God blessed a lot of people in our Bibles, and they went through
Yep.
a lot of tough things too.
Yep. And that's,
So,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, when we were reading about Paul and his suffering and how it's heard about it, one of the first things that comes to my mind is early in the book of Acts. One of the first things is they have all those apostles in there, because they're teaching and preaching in the name of Jesus. And finally, they even get beaten. And when they get back where everybody else is, they're rejoicing because they've been counted worthy to
Yeah.
suffer for the name of Christ.
Yeah.
And that's just not the way most of us.
No. That's a tough attitude to have. That's a tough attitude to have. And I think we could all fall in that boat, like Stan's saying, is thinking, have we suffered enough? And we've all, right here you go. We have all, okay. We have all suffered in our lives. We have all had issues and we have all had suffering in our lives, but we have not always associated with Jesus, because of Jesus. And I wanted to add one thing to this. I don't want to flippantly say that suffering is part of life because I know it's hard. I'm not saying you should, like Stan said, the apostles' attitude, I'm not there. I can tell you that right now. I'm not ready to rejoice. But a lot of people are suffering in this world, in this country and things. And, even if it's not necessarily for Christ, suffering is part of life. It is part of what we're told is going to happen to us, So That's good, Stan. Anybody else? Any other comments?
To me, bottom line, it's gonna get down to, God knows a lot of things that we don't understand. And so, if he says it's good for us to suffer, I expect it is.
Yeah, yeah.
We just got to somehow be able to come to that understanding ourselves.
Well, there definitely has to be some kind of dividing point between earth and heaven, too. I mean, if everything's great here on earth, then what are we looking forward to? What do we got to look forward to? The transition would not be that much, and I understand we don't know everything about heaven, and we probably don't know much at all.
Pretty sure it won't be suffering.
No, that's right. We know that. We know there won't be suffering. But we don't know, even if you have a good life here on earth, or what you consider a good life, or what people consider a good life on earth here, if when you go to heaven, it's still going to be a whole lot better, no matter what happens here on earth. So, anybody else? All right. Going to get into this thing about what he said, people preaching here, different motives for preaching, some not good. Okay, Paul says some people are preaching Jesus, and he doesn't really say they're preaching it wrong. He says they're preaching it for the wrong motives. He says they're preaching from the wrong motives. So the different motives for preaching, some good, some not good. What are the ones who are not preaching Jesus for the right motives? Why are they doing it? To add what? Yeah. To add to my suffering. That's what he says. Paul says the ones who aren't teaching Jesus out of goodwill or good faith are doing it to add to my suffering. He also says some are doing it for the right reasons, so that's good. But once again, his reaction is interesting. What's his reaction to some preaching Jesus good and some preaching Jesus out of personal gain or envy or to hurt him? He says what? It's all good. It's all good. All right? Now, I think we could argue, I'm not arguing with Paul here at all. I do think we could argue that occasionally if it's the wrong teaching, then it can't be good, But according to Paul, just according to what Paul says, that's not the case here necessarily. It does not sound like the wrong message is being preached. It just sounds like it's being preached for the wrong reason. And I really meant to do some research on this. I wanted to get in my head, how could somebody be preaching Jesus accurately, which is kind of what it seems like is going on here, but be hurting Paul? Maybe saying that Paul deserved this or something. There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of things I can think of, but I wondered if anybody really knew what message these people were preaching that was hurting Paul, or could be damaging to Paul. We get a little glimpse here into envy and strife. They preach Christ from envy and strife, which, like I said, I'll be honest, I don't completely understand that. I don't completely understand exactly what's going on there. And some also from goodwill. But either way, Paul's happy. Paul says, even if it hurts me, if the gospel's being preached, I'm happy about it. Okay? Well, let's talk about that for a few minutes. We got some real life examples today, don't we? Where is Jesus being preached today that we sometimes look down upon? And I'm not talking about denominations. I'm not talking about other denominations at all. But what do we see that we usually kind of cut our eyes at a little bit about Jesus being preached? Okay, that could be one. Although we should be happy about that, right, Miss Margaret? We should be happy about Jesus being preached in prisons for sure. So that was what I was thinking of. There might be other examples, but we see these what we call televangelists, okay, and we see them up there, and they're kind of carrying on. And what do we see? What do we usually associate this? How's the message usually end?
Money.
Send me money. That's right. How does it usually end? To send me money. So if you listen, and I haven't. I'll say that up front. I haven't always listened. But if you listen to the message, many times what? It's not a bad message. It's usually very simple, maybe it's not the word. It's usually very plain. It's not always a bad message at all. It can be biblically based. It can be gospel, But at the end, when people start asking for money, then we kind of say, yeah, there we go. That's kind of our mindset is there we go. That's the one example, kind of I could think of a modern day example where what would Paul say about this? Paul might say what? Hey, at least they're preaching, and at least the people who got the TV on, Doherty, what? They're getting a little bit. They're getting something, you know. They don't have to send money if they don't want to. You know, nobody's holding a gun to their head to send money. So that was kind of the example that I thought of in our modern day. Do what? I thought somebody had a question. That's what I think of kind of in our modern day of something that Paul might have been thinking of. These people are preaching Jesus, the televangelist, as we see it. Not all are, I'm sure. Some are fine, I'm sure. But we see it as they're preaching Jesus for what? Their own personal gain, their financial gain. Okay, and Paul would say, you know what? At least they're preaching. At least somebody's hearing about Jesus.
I don't have my glasses on. I think it's in Mark, where the disciples are telling Jesus they're using your name.
Yeah.
They've got demons and
Yeah.
stuff, and he tells them if they're using my name, they're not against. They won't be against me the next
Yep.
moment. So
Yeah, there's,
I don't quite understand that, and it says they will receive their reward.
yeah, yeah.
So Jill and I have been talking about that, and we don't have answers for it yet.
No, we don't. That's right. That's right. We don't.
He tells them don't condemn them.
Don't condemn them. Yep, that's right. That's right. So, you know, we have, like I said, we have examples like that of things where Jesus. Now, once again, I personally, and this is just me, I would draw a line of it being preached correctly. You know, that I don't think any time the message, what we call the gospel, anytime it's being preached and it's not biblically based, it's not something that is based on the Bible, based on God's Word, I can't really see how that would be good necessarily. So anyway, any thoughts on that? Good comment.
I think you gotta read that closely and see what Paul rejoices in. I don't, any time in the Bible, we know that that motives are important to God.
Right.
Why we're doing what we're doing, we know that that's a big deal. And I don't think Paul is rejoicing even though their motives are wrong.
Mhm.
I mean, about their motives, he's
Yeah.
rejoicing because Jesus
Yeah.
is being preached.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Yep.
Even if their motives are wrong, at least Jesus is being preached, and that I'm going to rejoice. Now, I'm sure if he could, he would try to give them, change their mind. You know, he would say, hey, you need to do this for a different reason.
And that would apply, in my opinion, to my televangelist thing. Preaching it right, but for the wrong motive. Money's not the motive of preaching the gospel, you know.
I mean, you think a lot of reasons why somebody might preach. I'm going to preach because I'm going to prove that I'm right and you're wrong.
That's right.
You know,
Yep. Yep.
That's really, I mean, the truth is very important. If that's the only reason we're preaching, then
Yep.
obviously that needs a little adjusting too.
Yep.
There's a lot of things you can see.
Yep.
Well, I'm glad that the gospel's being preached, but you appreciate the right motive.
The right motives. And that's good. We know, and we can see from what we do here, envy and strife, we know what? That's not the right motive. You know, we absolutely know that's not the right motive. Goodwill is the one. That's what is seen as the good motive, is those who are preaching from goodwill. So, all right. Very good. Good stuff. Make sure I hit all that, the negative. Yep, add Paul's affliction. So the message of Christ is more important than our personal satisfaction. That's kind of the point Paul's saying here. These people are preaching Jesus in order to hurt me. I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of what he says. Add to my affliction. That's kind of what he says. So, but he says the motive is more important. You know, them preaching hurts me, but I'm okay with it if it helps somebody else. And you know, one thing I thought about there, about Paul being okay with that, and obviously I'm not saying that our Baptist neighbors up here are wrong. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm just saying, he talks about like rivalry, you know, talks about, you know, people preaching for different motives. I think it would be a terrible situation if we had a adversarial relationship with the Farmington Baptist Church here. I think that would put a bad light on all Christians. You know what? Don't y'all believe kind of the same thing? Why can't y'all get along? You know, I think the fact that, and I'll just throw out just a couple of examples. You know, when it comes to trunk or treat, We talk to them, hey, what are y'all doing? We work together to hopefully get kids here and get taken care of, and things like that. And we don't partner with them on a whole lot, and we've got some differences. But I think you'll agree with me, and if you don't, that's okay, and I'm not saying I'm right. I think if you look at our differences and our similarities, I think you'll see a whole lot of similarities and a very few differences. I think that's what you'll see. And because of that, we can work with them, and we can promote the cause of Jesus, even though we might have a few things we disagree on. We can look down there at that parking lot, at least I can. I can look down there at that parking lot, no matter how many cars there are, I can say, what? That's good. I'm glad. I'm glad they're there.
Well, Church of Christ churches have talked with G Cornerstone and them, and how are y'all growing?
Yeah.
That?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've heard that. Mm-hmm.
Doesn't mean that they might have suggestions and things that could help you.
Yep. So there needs to be no rivalry when Christ is being preached for the right reason. When Christ is being preached for the right reason, there does not need to be rivalry, there does not need to be jealousy, there does not need to be any undermining in any way. I think that's a good lesson we're getting here from Paul. Okay. Anybody else on that? We're getting ready to move sections. All right, let's read, I believe it's 19 through 26. I've already read 19. Make sure. Yeah, 19 through 26. For I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and hope that is nothing I shall be ashamed, but with all boldness, as always. So now also Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. So here we go. This is one of the most famous verses in the whole New Testament right here, verse 21. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. But if I live on in the flesh, this will mean fruit from my labor. Yet what I shall choose I cannot tell. For I am hard pressed between the two, having a desire to depart to be with Christ, which is far better. Nevertheless, to remain in the flesh is more needful for you. And being confident of this, I know I shall remain and continue with you all for the progress of the joy of faith, that your rejoicing for me may be more abundant in Jesus Christ by my coming to you again. So these verses basically are a Paul debating with himself in writing. Paul's basically debating with himself in writing whether it's better for him to die or whether it's better for him to live on, even though he's in chains, even though he's in kind of a jail. That's kind of the basis here. He is fighting this battle. First, though, he says, before we get into that, he has faith that through their prayers and through Jesus, he will be delivered. Okay? He says that. He says, basically, he's going to say, I think I'm going to be delivered. I feel like with your help, with the help of Jesus, that I'm going to be delivered and I'm going to see you again. But of course, he always adds a I don't know what you call it, a little addendum or something to that. But if not, what? I'm okay. Okay? If that's not the case, don't think I'm miserable if I die, because for me that's to gain. That's something that I wonder at the time if that was something that was unusual to hear. It's something that we don't often hear, that we don't often think about, is that, we want to stay alive. To live is good, but to die is what? Better. Let's put Paul says gain, let's just put another word on it, is better, okay? Is better. So that's what Paul is to that point in his life. He's confident that he will be delivered, but if not, he is okay. So, talks about life is good, but to die is gain. Like I said, hard concept for this, and he sees it as a difficult decision. We all know what the decision is here. This is for those of us, and I say us, and here I put everybody in this category. For those of us who have studied the Bible and know what Paul's talking about here, why is it good for him to stay alive? Is it good for him? Yeah, it's good for others, Rick. Okay, Paul's basically saying, as he explains the situation, what I'm talking about, for me to live on is better, not for me. I'm kind of, I've been suffering here. I've been beaten. I'm probably going to be beaten again, shipwrecked, you name it. But what he's saying here is that it's good for you. It's good for the other churches I've visited. That's what's good, okay? That's the part of living that's good. I can keep on encouraging. I can keep on teaching, all right? Paul's not saying that out of arrogance, I don't believe. He's just saying that out of his knowledge, you know. But to die is gain. Gain for who? Him, all right. Gain for him. That's what the gain is gain for him. He is very confident in his salvation. I think one of the lessons we can get from this scriptures here is Paul's confidence in his salvation. That is a big that's a big deal. Are we confident in our salvation? I'm not asking that for an answer. I'm just throwing it out there. You know, how confident are we in our salvation compared to Paul? And you might say, well, I'm not Paul, and I agree with that. I'm not either. That's what I'm saying. I agree we're not, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But we do need to try to get somewhere close to Paul's idea of how confident we are in our salvation. If Paul was not confident in his salvation, he would have not made this statement, okay? Anybody who's not confident in their salvation is not going to say to die is gain if they're not really sure what's going to happen after they die. That's not a comment you would make in that situation. So Paul's very confident about this. We need Paul's confidence. You know, we can learn from the words Paul writes in all his Gospels. We can learn a lot from those. But one thing we can learn is attitude from Paul. Okay? And we all know attitude makes a big difference. Stan earlier talked about motives. Motives and attitude both make a huge difference. And the attitude that Paul had is something that we can learn even if we didn't study what he wrote, which is very important too. But we can look at his attitude, his confidence, okay, of every time he was in trouble, this is not good, I get it, but I'm doing this for Christ. So we can learn from that. Now, just like I mentioned this, I think a couple weeks ago, just like when we try to live a life like Jesus, which is what we're supposed to do, right? We're supposed to emulate Jesus and live like Jesus. Are we ever going to meet that? No, we're never going to meet that. Should that destroy us? Should that discourage us because we're not ever going to be like Jesus? No. Okay, no. We strive for that. We try to live the best we can like Jesus, but when we occasionally fall short, do we try to do better? Sure, but you don't pound yourself into the ground. You don't beat yourself up when you don't quite meet those expectations. Well, Paul's not Jesus. I get that. Paul's not Jesus, but he is a good man to try to emulate. So when we try to emulate Paul's confidence in his salvation, and we try to emulate Paul's attitude, things like that, if we don't reach up, if we don't quite reach that, don't beat yourself up about it, okay? Paul is a good person to strive to be like when it comes to attitude, motives, and confidence in their salvation. But don't beat yourself up if you're not quite there. It's something to strive for, but we're not Paul, okay? So. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You didn't listen. That's right.
It says even in the Bible, we have shown you over and over signs, and you still do not believe.
Yep. You know, even in this life, when people ask if they pray or whatever, and I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying if you've ever done this, I'm not saying wrong. I'm just saying what we should expect. If we pray, God, just show me what to do. Just show. If you'll just give me a sign. If I'm supposed to take this job, when I wake up in the morning, I want my toaster, Jody, to be sitting upside down on my table, okay? It says exactly what to do. Yeah. And you know, yeah. And you know what his answer would be. What? I've told you. You just got to read it. Okay? That's his answer. That's right. We have heard, and I'm not making that up. Jesus has said that, you know. Jesus has said that we gave you had the prophets, and you had the scriptures, and what? You had Moses, you didn't listen, okay? So That's our guide. That's our goal, is Jesus has given us, God has given us an answer. It's just not the direct answer we want. Now, has God done that in the past? You go back to the Old Testament, which is a different time. You go back to the Old Testament, God has given signs before, with the fleece and the dew and all that kind of stuff, God has given signs before, but that's not the way it works right now, okay? He will, we have got what we're supposed to do. We just have to pay attention to it, and we have to ask for wisdom, we have to pray for wisdom, we have to act accordingly.
We have to have trust.
Trust, that's right. Anybody else? Good things to comment on there. Anybody else on that? Well, the last thing I've got written down there is he will be able to accomplish so much more if he lives, and that's kind of what we said. He talks about encouraging. He talks about faith. He talks about return to speak to him and all that stuff. And that's kind of where he ends. There is having this rejoicing. All right, last three verses, 4, I guess, 27 through 30. Here's where we talk about suffering more. Only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of your affairs, that you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel, and not in any way terrified by your adversaries, which is to them a proof of perdition, but to you of salvation, and that from God. For to you it has been granted on behalf of Christ not only to believe in him, but also to suffer for his sake, having the same conflict which you saw in me, now here is in me. All right, so we got some things there about talking about not being terrified of your adversaries and different things like that. Paul often talks about faith, and he talks about confidence, and he talks about speaking boldly. And that's one thing he says right here. He encouraged them first, and this is important, but it's not really what it's about. He encouraged them to be one spirit, working together, different things like that. There was something I was going to read. I don't know if I've gotten to it yet or not. There's a couple of things that okay, here it is. Suffering, and this is what we covered earlier, and I jumped to the end, as I sometimes do when I'm worried I won't get to a point I really want to make. Suffering is a part of the Christian life, okay? That is just something, we'd be so much better off if we could get a hold of that concept, but it's hard, it's just difficult. We don't want suffering. That's not human nature. But if we know that it's part of the Christian life, somehow we've got to be better prepared for that. And we go a step further, and Stan already talked about it. We go a step further, and this is really hard. It's not only part of the Christian life. Let's go one step. It's a what? What did the apostles say? It's a privilege. Okay? They were kind of worthy. They rejoiced in what happened to them. Okay? All right. I'll be the first one to admit, I'm not there. Okay? If you are, Regina's shaking her head. If you are, that's great, but I'm not there. I can't, I'm not there yet. And what Stan talked about earlier, thinking about gosh, it does seem like things have gone well. I've never really had to do that. That is a concern, But if it does happen to me, I'm not sure I'm ready for it. But suffering is a part of Christian life, and it's also a privilege. Count yourself worthy, Jesus says. Count yourself worthy if this takes place. But you look at page 36 real quick. I've got two things I want to read. This really, I thought it interesting. It doesn't really apply to suffering, but I thought it was a pretty good list. We go back to talking about one spirit, and that's when I meant to read this. Just the end of the verse says, I may hear of your affairs, that you stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together the faith of the gospel. And that gives the verse. From this statement, we learn several facts. I thought this is pretty interesting, 1, 2, and 3. Each person has the ability to control his or her conduct. It is possible to conduct oneself in a way that honors Christ. It is possible to conduct oneself in a way that dishonors Christ. All right? That seems extremely simple, those 3 points right there. That seems extremely, you tell somebody that, the adage in our day and age is going to be, well, duh, But we think about that. I think sometimes we fall into the trap of we fall in the trap of, well, everybody sins, so I sin too. So aren't we all in the same boat? Aren't we all in the same boat? If we're all sinners, aren't we all in the same boat? Okay, that's not exactly right. Are we kind of in the same boat? In some ways we are. But look at these three things right here. Each person has the ability to control his or her conduct. This is something that you'd get some argument about in our day and age. Now, I'm not putting aside. I will say this. I'm setting aside people who have mental issues and mental challenges. I understand that's different. Whether it's elderly or whether it's you're born that way, I understand there are people who lose control of their own conduct, but that's not what this is talking about here. This is talking about people who are in their right mind. Each person has the ability to control his own conduct, and that leads to 2 and 3. It's possible to, using this statement that you can control your own conduct, it's possible to conduct yourself in a way that honors Christ, and it's also possible to conduct your way in a way that dishonors Christ. So what is this saying here? What do we have? Personal choice, okay? We have personal choice and personal responsibility. Our actions are upon us. As long as we are reasonably thinking, as long as our minds are in order, we are the ones who decide our conduct, okay? So I don't know what you take from that, but I thought it was pretty interesting to think about that in that manner. So suffering being part of the loss. Here's another thing. Look at verse 28 real quick. And not in any way terrified by your adversaries. All right. I thought that was an interesting thing. Who are our adversaries? I wouldn't have thought about that except the author covers it a little bit. Who are our adversaries? Okay, that's what the book says, Jody. That's right. Our adversaries are not people necessarily who treat us bad, because we're supposed to love our enemies even, okay? Our adversaries are definitely not our neighbors and people we don't even know. Here is what the biblical seems to be the thing on this. This is on page 37. People who are opposed to the gospel, and this is kind of the same thing to me. Those who fall away from the faith and become opponents of God, okay? Our adversaries are people who are out there trying to turn people away from Christ, okay? Now that's a tough concept. Kenny, a lot of times we think of our adversaries as people in other countries, and they might fall into this category of these two things right here. But we think of our adversaries as people who are mean and who go around doing things they shouldn't, perverted, whatever. Now, once again, I'm not saying that's good, but how do we react to those people? We try to teach them, we try to love them, we admit our mistakes. Those aren't our adversaries. Our adversaries are people who are preaching against Christ, who are giving a different message other than the message of Christ. And to me, that's a different mindset. That changed my mindset a little bit about the world and who are our adversaries. Sometimes we think just people who are bad people are our adversaries. And once again, not that they need to be that way, but they are maybe misguided, maybe they have not been taught, things like that. But people who are preaching against the gospel are adversaries. And then obviously the third one, and this is of course the great adversary, Satan himself. Okay, Satan and his demons and his influence on this earth is our adversary too. So our adversary could be people in other countries if they are what? If they're preaching something other than the gospel message. Okay? Any thoughts on that? Did I blow you away with that statement? Or are you like, yeah, I always knew that? Anybody got any comments on that? Agree or disagree? All right. As always, you know my theory. Agreement means what? No, silence, I'd give it away. Silence means agreement. All right, silence means agreement. So that's what I'm going to say that. We got just a few more minutes here. Yes.
Our conversation this morning has reminded me something that I had on my phone that probably should have already been shared with everybody else, but I'm reminded of it because we're talking about a man who says, I may die, I may live, but one thing for sure, if I can live, I'm just going to keep doing everything I can for the good of everybody. If I don't,
Right.
I'll be with the Lord.
Yep.
This is from the Flynn family.
Okay?
To our dear brothers and sisters, Paul said it best in Philippians 1:3-6. You have been our partners in the gospel from the first day until now. I asked Dorian recently when we were going to retire, and he said, retire? No, we're going to sprint through the finish line. And he did. I picked him up from Africa at the airport on Saturday. Sunday morning, he went to be home.
People like Dorian, people with that kind of drive, with that kind of faith, there is no retiring. You can slow down a little bit if you have to, but he didn't want to. He sprinted to the end, and I think Paul did too. You know, I think Paul sprinted to the end. You know, there's no letting up. We got plenty of time after we're gone from this earth to be with God. You know, we got plenty of time for that. There's no need to rush it. Although we should look forward to it, there's no need to rush it. But he kept going. That's right. That's right. Very good.
Sherry is leaving tomorrow to go back to Africa, and it's her first time back to Africa since Dorian died.
That will be emotional. Yeah, that will be very emotional right there, because there'll be people glad to see her, but it will bring back some emotions.
All of this stuff is still
Yeah.
in her apartment.
Oh, May. Yeah. Yeah. That's she needs our prayers. Then she needs our prayers. Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that, Margaret. Last thing, we're almost well, we are at time, but that's okay. And I already mentioned this. You know, one thing I think we think of is God has all this power, all the power to do anything He wants. He can stop us from suffering. So that right there tells you that suffering is part of the plan. If suffering wasn't part of the plan, God would stop it. Okay, He can and does. He does stop some. You know, once we get to a certain point, He does stop some. But why do I have to suffer on this earth? If God is so powerful and God is all-knowing and all-doing, why do I have to suffer? Well, right there's the answer. It's part of the plan. It's just simply part of God's plan.
Well, you said earlier, if everything was so super great here, what would we have to look for?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, couple of little things on the applications here. This is at the bottom of the first one. This is not Scripture. This is the author. Rather than complaining about the situations we find ourselves in, let us take advantage of the moments we are given to spread the message of Jesus, is kind of one of the message here. And the last one I'll let you read on your own. It's about suffering as well. It's very, very similar to kind of what we've talked about. So anyway, all right, very good. We went just a little over. I could tell by the amount of deep subjects in that lesson, we would probably go over a little bit, but that's okay. Only 5, not even 5 minutes. So thank you.